This is Sports Spectrum, the sports and faith podcast where we bring Jesus into the conversation. Here's your host, Jason Romano.
Hey guys, welcome to the show. I am Jason and this is Sports Spectrum. So glad you tuned into our show today. Our website is sportspectrum.com. That's a great place to go for all of our content here at the Media Ministry of Sports Spectrum. Articles, devotionals, podcasts, all available at the website, sportspectrum.com. And then you can email me directly, jason@sportspectrum.com, if you have a guest idea or a show topic or just want to say hello, maybe drop a line and talk about today's show. You can email me directly, jason@sportspectrum.com. And we are presented today by Compassion International, and they're doing an amazing thing right now called Fill the Stadium. Because of COVID-19, children around the world are living in poverty, and the issue of food has gone from hunger to starvation. It's a bad situation right now, but Compassion isn't just sitting around and doing nothing about it. They're teaming up with pro athletes to help fill a stadium worth of children that are sitting there in crisis right now. You can learn more by donating and going to the website, fillthestadium.com, fillthestadium.com. We're also presented today by Water Mission, a nonprofit Christian engineering ministry that fights the global water crisis. Safe water, sanitation, hygiene solutions in developing countries and disaster areas. This organization means so much to us, and they're a great partner and a great friend and have served more than 5 million people in 56 countries. I'll tell you a little bit more about them coming up, but for now, you can check out their website, watermission.org, to pray for them, to pray with them, and to learn more about the great work they're doing fighting the global water crisis at watermission.org. Today on Sports Spectrum, we welcome back to the show Adam LaRoche. Adam, of course, a former Major League Baseball player, 12 years, 12 seasons in the major leagues with the Braves, the Pirates, the Red Sox, the Diamondbacks, the Nationals, and his last few years with the White Sox. Hit 255 career home runs, a 2012 Gold Glove winner, and a 2012 Silver Slugger winner. He played first base. His brother Andy also played in the majors, and his dad, Dave LaRoche, was also a Major League Baseball pitcher and a coach. Adam is also affiliated with Buck Commander, with guys like Luke Bryan and Jason Aldean from the country music world, and Willie Robertson from Duck Dynasty, and a few other baseball players, Ryan Langerhans and Tombo Martin, and Adam LaRoche as part of Buck Commander. This was an awesome conversation. It went in a place that I didn't completely expect it to. We had Adam on back in 2017, and it was a podcast focused strictly on his desire to be a part of the human trafficking movement and to combat human trafficking. And we also had Gary Haugen, who's the president of International Justice Mission, another partner and sponsor with us. And we had Adam on back then to talk more about specifically human trafficking. And in this interview, we went a lot of different places. We hear Adam's testimony and his walk with Christ and how he grew in his walk with Jesus. We hear a little bit about the Buck Commander crew and hunting. I asked him what his greatest experience ever was as a hunter, so he'll tell you that answer. And then we went into the human trafficking side, and that actually played a big role in Adam walking away from a $12 million contract, $13 million contract, in his final season in 2016 as a Major League Baseball player. And we talk about maybe any regrets that he might have, any thoughts on thinking back to that time and if he would have done things differently. But really an encounter and a trip to Thailand really changed his life forever. And wait till you hear what he's doing now. It's pretty amazing. Adam LaRoche, the former Major League Baseball player, joins us today on Sports Spectrum. Let's take a listen. Adam, welcome back to Sports Spectrum, sir. How are you?
Man, I'm good, buddy. Been a long time. Thanks for having me back on.
Yeah, absolutely. It's good to see you. It's funny. I wanted to start with this. I think you'll laugh. I remember being an 11-year-old kid, and I remember seeing your last name, LaRoche, and I'm like, I know that name from somewhere. So I did a little research, and I'm like, Dave LaRoche was your dad, obviously a former big league pitcher. But in 1985, Dave LaRoche was the pitching coach for the Albany Colony Yankees. Now, I grew up in Albany, New York, and so I went to I don't want to say hundreds, but probably a dozen at least Albany Colony Yankee games. And I remember watching your dad there. So how crazy is that? You must have been, what, 5, 6 years old during that time?
Yeah, maybe even younger than that. That's good, because I thought you were going to say when you were 11 years old, you watched me play, and I was going to have to check some birth certificates here, because
Adam, I'm 6 years. I'm 6 years older than you, so
okay,
that's impossible.
Right.
But that's unless you were playing at 5 years old. That's good for you.
Well,
But
man, I talk to some younger players now that guys in the big leagues that say they watched me and like they were in middle school when I was playing. I'm thinking, man, where has time gone? So.
And you're just
Anyway,
40. I mean, it's not like you're that old. This guy's still
41.
playing in the league. 41. There you go.
41 a couple days ago, but
okay.
Yeah, man. Gosh, that was, I mean, I could talk about that for an hour, just growing up in the game. And that was one of the,
well, that's kind of where I wanted to go, like being
coolest.
around it, right? What was that like, being around that with your father?
Great. Cause it showed me what I wanted to do. But it also showed me, at times what I didn't want to be like, or how, maybe the paths I didn't want to go down. And that's what's great about baseball, especially bouncing around with my dad, coaching with a bunch of teams at all different levels and being around so many different types of players, and getting to see those personalities.
What didn't you want to do?
I didn't want to be the one that didn't acknowledge the clubbies and the bat boys and the fans and the, support staff there. And I think because when I was young, I was kind of, my brothers and I, we were kind of clubbies or bat boys, so we were always in that world with those guys. And we would get to see behind the curtain a little bit, as they're back in the clubbies room and when they're having their conversations and meetings, and just, you could hear and you could feel the way they were treated by certain guys, and, good and bad. So it gave me a fairly clear picture of who I wanted to be and what I didn't want to be like. And I wanted to always remember that.
You're one of the co-owners and part of Buck Commander with Willie Robertson, Luke Bryan, Jason Aldean, and others. It's awesome to watch those videos and post it on social media and the show. But was hunting and fishing in the outdoors something that goes back to your childhood as well, or is that something that didn't take place until you got older?
No, we grew up doing that. Yeah, my dad was more of a bird hunter. So he was a big upland game, pheasant, quail, and then anything fishing. So yeah, it wasn't the big game, and the bow hunting and all that came later on when I was in high school probably. But yeah, we grew up in the outdoors. Grew up most of my life living right here in Fort Scott, Kansas, which is in the middle of nowhere. And if you don't have outdoor interests, you probably have no business being here, because that's about all we offer, which is awesome. We're right in the heart of it. So yeah, it's hard to grow up not doing that around here.
What's the greatest experience? Like I think about, as a baseball player, you probably have one of those days where you went 5 for 5, hit a couple homers, everything was just clicking on that day. What's the greatest experience you've had hunting? Is there a 5 for 5 day with a couple homers that, is the equivalent of you when you go out and have a day, a night, a morning, whatever it is? For
sure.
Yeah.
For sure. And I can say without a doubt that they had nothing to do with me hunting. As you could probably imagine, a couple of them were my kids when they went out and shot their first deer. Although my daughter hated it and it ruined her for life. So the experience, it was awesome for a minute, and then she was mad at me, and that's another story. But Drake going out, and both of them hunting for the first time and going out and sitting with me and being interested in it is right up there with a 5 for 5 day in baseball. And then as of recent, the last few years, man, I've been so lucky. I've killed some really big animals in the last few years. Just been really fortunate. But it's funny how the next day that kind of goes away, right? Or maybe a day or two later, it's like, okay, what's next? And we've got to host soldiers out here, and we have a group coming in here in a few days. We bring in usually 6 or 8 soldiers at a time, and going out and sitting with these guys that have a lot of times have never hunted and never killed anything, and to watch the excitement and what they get out of it. And also just the hours in the stand with somebody, to be able to just talk life. And then, when they do kill an animal, it's just incredible. And if I had to pick right now, one or the other, I would say I'll never hunt again if I can just go guide these guys, when we host them out here to the ranch. So those two, my kids, and then having our vets come out and be a part of that, and just hearing their story and put them back in that team room, locker room atmosphere, and watch them light up just makes my year.
It's pretty cool. I got a really good friend of mine named Scott, who is a hunter. He loves hunting, and I've never been with him, and I've never hunted a day in my life, Adam. So maybe we got to get off this call and we got to get on a flight to wherever Fort Scott, Kansas is.
If you can find it, come on. I'll set you up.
I love it. We'll definitely do that. Adam LaRoche is joining us here on Sports Spectrum. I want to ask you about adjustment to the major leagues for you, and maybe where your faith plays a role in that. What is that faith journey for you, and how does it parallel with your time becoming a big league player?
I may go back even a little further than that, if that's all right.
Absolutely.
And kind of part of, I guess, a real short version of my testimony is when I was in high school, it was great the first couple years, and I think everybody can relate to this. And then at some point, my junior senior year, like I was over it, and I couldn't wait to get to college. Right, I can't wait to get on to college where, it's more baseball all the time, doing my own thing, get to college, do that for a couple years, junior college. And even at some point in junior college, I was like, man, I can't wait to get out of here and start my career. I just want to sign with somebody and start my pro career, start making some money, do that. Minor leagues, it's awesome when you first sign, and man, I'm in pro ball. Doesn't take long. It sucks. I can't wait to get out of here. I'm ready to get to the big leagues and start doing that. And then I can't wait to sign a contract. Then I can't wait to make $1 million. I want to make 10 million, and it just goes on and on. And fortunately, I was fairly young when that kind of hit me. And I started looking back at high school and college and all these things that I thought would satisfy me getting there. And then when I did, it just didn't do it. And honestly, it's sad to say, but the major leagues was the same way. Come on, that's just a total fantasy world that we live in, way overpaid. Shoot, you don't even pack your own bags to go on a road trip. It's just, it really is a fantasy world. So to not be satisfied there got me really thinking about what does satisfy? Like, there's got to be something that fills that void that's left empty. Even at the top of my game, like the top of my profession in the major leagues. And fortunately was around some awesome teammates over the years that I don't know that it was anything they said. I think it was more watching them and their actions and what they did that kind of made me start going down that road of there's something else to this eternity thing, and this this kind of worldly, this this short stint on earth that we have, and what is our purpose? What's our mission here? And just kind of start digging into that. And I'm not saying I have the answers at all, but I'm way more clear on it than I was back at 25 years old.
So who were some of the guys? Who were some of the teammates that kind of walked you through that process? And
gosh, I got to come up with Atlanta, and I was like, there was a very few young guys. We had some older guys. Obviously, John Spoltz being one of our chapel rep, our team dad, team kind of everything. And he was one that took a few of us under his wing early on, and I guess helped us understand the importance of accountability. And I remember sitting in chapel one day, and not to go down a different trail, but I remember sitting in chapel one day and hearing Smoltzy talk about when he goes to his hotel room, that he goes in and he calls down and has the movie shut off, which probably sounds crazy because there was no Apple TV, all that back then. But
sure,
in his mind, he was like, he had to make it a point everywhere he went to basically put on that armor of Christ and not let the guard down. But I'll never forget that, because when I heard him say it, I'm like, man, this is a guy. that is an absolute follower of Jesus. So to hear him talk about like some of the same struggles and how he prevents that and intentionally keeps himself out of those situations and, does all the things he can do to prevent, in that case, lust. So it's turn the movies off, make sure there's no access there. And anyway, that was just a great example of hearing somebody that we all looked up to, and was just a great example of a man, and to show us kind of show us that path to walk. So, and I'm trying to think, Julio Franco, he was 100 years old then when I was playing with him, and
yeah,
same way in his own totally different way. Just to be able to look over any time throughout the day, if we weren't working out or doing something, he's in his locker reading his Bible. And so get to kind of dive as a fellow first baseman, to kind of dive into that with him. And that was I was really lucky to come up with some good influences.
Discipleship is so important in this walk as followers of Christ. How difficult was that for you to be discipled, to stay discipled throughout your career? Because you played 11 years. So what was that like, being discipled? I know certainly PAO and the Increased Conference is a big place for a lot of players to come to and experience Christ, but that's for 4 days. So what does discipleship look like for you?
When I left Atlanta as one of the younger guys, I quickly went into one of the older guys on the team, because then I went to a really young team in Pittsburgh for a few years. So I instantly went from kind of under the radar, just coming in and listening to the older guys, to coming into a spot where then it became my role to disciple, mentor, and lead some of our younger guys. And I absolutely loved it. I loved the being in that position, and being, not to brag, but looked up to in a way, just because guys are younger and guys are rookies and coming up. And so to get to take some of the things I learned and put them into practice there with our young team. I was married really young, had kids at the time. Fortunately, the nightlife and all, I kind of got it out of my system in college and maybe a little in the minor leagues, and it just wasn't attractive to me. But yeah, I don't know that there's anything more important than having a group of men that you can really talk life with. And I say that like, I'm talking from the small talk conversations to getting away from and really talking life with guys. I've always been amazed at how some of the hardest men, like when you look at them from the outside and they're just have that wall up, how much they enjoy talking like real life, and how even the uncomfortableness of it sometimes. So yeah, again, being able to learn that early on and have some of those talks with young guys that were teammates a long time ago that I still, I'm really close with and stay in touch with. And I love the fact that they'll call me for advice sometimes, whether it's marriage or contracts or just the world we're in now with the political stuff and the COVID virus. And it's really cool that they view me that way to kind of lean on sometimes.
So what does that look like for you now, though? Because you were just telling me before we started recording, you have a son who's out, a daughter who's on her way out. You're about to be empty nesters, and I'm guessing part of that, Buck Commander team. There's some guys there that you're probably pretty close with too. But what does that look like for you now, in the importance of staying connected with other guys and doing life today versus when you were 25 or 30?
I'll start with Buck Commander. And again, we've got, you said Willie Robertson, Jason, Luke, a couple of country music guys, and then Tyler Farr, another country music guys, are kind of newest addition to the team, and Ryan Langerhans and Tombo Martin, two former baseball players.
Yeah.
Just a really solid group of guys. And you know, I'd love for you to, we talked about, I'd love for you to have Tombo on sometime and just hear his testimony, because he was one that came up hanging out with the Buck Commander crew, and was never really into this Jesus thing. And I think it was kind of uncomfortable, kind of weird. And I don't know that it's anything we ever said to him. I think it's just him watching and being in deer camp, being around each other for years, and him kind of seeing that you can have fun. You can go be a man and do really fun things and have a blast together and follow Jesus. Like, there's not a separation there where when I decide to follow Jesus, I can't have fun anymore. I've got to follow this whole set of guidelines and can't. I think you realize that no, actually you can, and it can be a lot more fun. And so I don't want to spoil his testimony, but I will say it's pretty powerful, because I think he went down a road that millions of people have been down. And he just chose to dive in and see what this was all about. And, you know, now it's just been a really cool, you know, few years since his transformation. So, and then you got Willie, who we all know is an outspoken believer, not ashamed of it at all, and comes by it honest from his dad, Phil, who very outspoken. So, you know, with him around all the time, and I've got to learn a ton from him. I've got to learn a ton from Tombo as a young believer. I mean, a ton from Tombo. I don't know that I would ever admit that if he was online with us.
We won't send him a link. Don't worry.
Yeah. But he's been, he's just been a really bright spot with our crew.
Now, what about personally too? Like you mentioned the Buck Commander crew, but do you also have a group of men or people that you can kind of confide in and talk to outside of that world?
I do, and if you Blaine Boyer, who's one that I lean on, that I can absolutely count on for telling me sometimes maybe what I don't want to hear, which I love. I love being around men like that aren't ashamed to talk about, you know, some of the tough subjects, and also guys that I don't need to be embarrassed to go to with my struggles. So yeah, Blaine's one. We got a really cool group here in town, and we haven't done it for a while with all this going on, but we typically do a Wednesday night study and, you know, have guys over to the house, and again, just talk about life. So cool. I've been so blessed on that front. And then with our foundation and some of the counter trafficking work we got to do, and some of the unbelievable men I've met really across the globe that I get to stay in touch with is pretty uplifting.
Sports Spectrum today is presented by Compassion International, the most trusted child development ministry in the world. And we're talking about COVID-19 impacting a lot of people around this world. And with Compassion, children around the world are living in poverty, and the issue of food has got really bad. It's gone from simply being hungry to starvation. The pandemic has magnified these children's needs, and they are truly in crisis. So we're partnering with an organization called Compassion International, and you know about them. They help kids in poverty all around the world meet their basic needs like food, clean water, and education, so they can not only survive, but reach their full potential. And of course, this past spring of 2020, most of the events that Compassion International relies on to help sponsor these children in crisis were canceled due to the pandemic, leaving 70,000 kids in desperate need of help. Now, 70,000 also happens to be the average size of many pro football stadiums that were once filled and now sit mostly empty. Each of the 70,000 empty seats represents a child in crisis who needs you, who needs all of us to step up and fill the stadium. Now, think about this. For the cost of a couple of tickets, food and drinks to the game that, of course, few can attend right now, you can help one child for an entire year through Compassion International. So we're teaming up with Compassion. You can team up as well to fill the stadium and help these kids in crisis. Join us by going to fillthestadium.com, clicking Give Now, and helping to release children from poverty. This is a stadium that cannot remain empty. fillthestadium.com. We're also presented today by Water Mission, a nonprofit Christian engineering ministry fighting the global water crisis. Yes, there is a global water crisis. Listen to these statistics. 2.1 billion people lacking access to safe water. 4.4 billion people lacking access to adequate sanitation. Those were billions with a B. That is insane that many people don't have access to the things that you and I take for granted: safe water and adequate sanitation. Listen to this. Around the world, women spend 200 million hours every day simply walking to get water, and one person dies every 37 seconds from water-related illnesses. And right now, Water Mission is working to stop the global spread of COVID-19 by providing urgently needed safe water, sanitation, and hygiene solutions to refugee settlements and other vulnerable communities. We love Water Mission. I think you guys will too. You need to go pray for them right now if you could, because the work that they're doing is so important. And if you feel led, please donate. Please support Water Mission and the great work they're doing. And check them out at their website, watermission.org. Watermission.org, fighting the global water crisis. I want to ask you about 2016, because I remember I was working on Mike and Mike at the time, and your story and walking away and abruptly retiring, that was a big deal for a couple of days. I don't know how much you paid attention as far as how the media was covering it, but it was obviously a very big deal that someone was walking away from a very large $13 million contract. Looking back now, it's been 4 or 5 years. Any regrets, any thoughts when you think back to that time? Because you never really did play baseball again. And I think for a lot of people, it was so abrupt that they would think, he'll eventually be back. Maybe he'll play again. He just needs some time. But you didn't do that.
Yeah. And there was no regrets, none. And honestly, I thought there might be. A couple of days after that, I'm wondering if it was the right move. And I wish I had a better memory, but I just remember event after event following that just confirmed that it was the right timing. And I can't even remember all the stories going around back then. One of the misunderstandings might be that it was strictly because, change of policy with the White Sox and kids could no longer come to the field unless you were 18 or whatever it was.
Yeah.
I'd gone to Thailand that off season and got introduced to trafficking for the first time, and it totally wrecked me. And I came back home and flew around and met with as many people that would let me in their office to try to understand this trafficking problem. And so I already went into that spring training a little bit conflicted on going to play a game while all this was going on in the world. So I think the whole thing with Drake was almost just confirmation that it's time to walk away and step away from it. And it was such an easy decision. I'm glad that it wasn't something I had to grind over for, days or a week, because it was a pretty quick, easy decision. I ran it by my wife and she's like, yeah, whatever you want to do, we'll follow. Both my kids, same way, talked to them about it and they're like, yeah, sounds great. Let's go back to the ranch and, spend a summer there. So yeah, no regrets on that at all. I don't know if it's a few years before that, if I make the same decision. I don't know if this happens back in 2012 or I don't know. I don't know if financially in a different spot and make a different decision. I don't know if just where I was with the Lord, where my maturity was at the time, if I view it the same, if I hear God's voice like I know I did then, because I think throughout my whole career, the hundreds of times I missed him calling me to go do something. You know what I mean? And that's something that I hate missing those, and I'll still miss them. I'll still get in my own way and I'll see something and I'll feel the Spirit like, man, go talk to this dude, man, go do this. Nah, but I'm late for I got to get to something totally unimportant. Yeah. And I don't want to miss those because I've followed through on them enough that I see the blessings that can come out of that. So again, years before that, I don't know where I'm at
Interesting.
As far as making that decision.
You said you went to Thailand that off season and it wrecked you. What did you see and why did it wreck you?
Um, I had, up until then, I had never really been in true darkness, in true evil, I don't think. And it's so hard to find in the States unless you're law enforcement or first responder or some of these select people, but we're pretty hidden here and pretty insulated from, I don't want to say evil, because I don't want to downplay that. I think we're in a spiritual battle every second of every day, but from like physically seeing just evil. When I saw it, and man, I saw it in the red light districts of really, really young girls being abused in these brothels, and like a mile of these brothels. I mean, they were just everywhere. And that was just the stuff, the front facing stuff that you could see. Some of the other behind the scene, So we did that for about 10 days. And really the mission there, and we've probably talked about it, but the mission there was to go into the brothels as a John. And that was really hard. And one thing, for a few months leading up to that trip, I remember praying, because I know as a man how I can struggle with lust. And when I see a girl with her shirt off, it's like my mind and eyes tend to wander. And so I prayed going over there for probably 3 months, just give me the eyes of Jesus. Like, I'm not asking for safety at all. I'm not asking for success. I just want to go over there and stay on mission with whatever situation we walk into. And man, we'd go into these, and Blaine Boyer went with me. Mickey Weston went on that trip, and man, we went into some of these brothels, and again, you're going in as a John, so as a buyer, so you're kind of having to try to look like, play the role, I guess, in your appearance and the way you speak, and try to get on audio and video, the mama-san or the pimp or trafficker that we call them here, negotiating a deal for these young girls. And when I would leave every night, when I go lay in bed, I couldn't tell you what girls were wearing, if they were clothed, if they were in bikinis, if they were naked, I just remember like from the neck up. So I say that because, one, it was a total answer to prayer, but that was confirmation for me that this is a fight that God wanted me in. I don't think I would have seen that and felt that way if this was something that he wasn't behind. So that's what made it easy coming back to go really commit some time to learning something that I knew nothing about. I couldn't have told you what trafficking meant 6 months before that. So yeah, that's been a lot of the last, I guess, 5 years, 4 or 5 years, kind of diving into that and trying to.
What's your involvement now with that? Now that we're here, and obviously it's tugged on your heart enough to the point where you're involved. So since then I did a few more trips over the years to some other countries and got to work with some awesome organizations. And really the past 2 years, outside of 1 or 2 trips outside the States, has all been right here in the U.S. We've got to work quite a few different cases. When I came back and started working in the U.S., I realized that it was much easier if I became law enforcement. It just made it a lot easier than coming in from the civilian nonprofit side and trying to work with law enforcement. So I went to Police Academy here in Kansas to become deputized here in Bourbon County, which now allows me that when I travel to other states, I can now attach with other task forces there. And it's been really cool because I come in as law enforcement, so I'm commissioned to be able to attach with other task force and units in the human trafficking fight. But I also come in from the nonprofit side, so I almost act as a kind of liaison between really good nonprofits that I've worked with that are doing awesome work, and connecting them with some agencies that are doing really good work, and just kind of being that connector. So something I never could foresee, but just kind of something that came out of it. It's been a neat partnership. What was that like to go to police academy? I mean, that's pretty cool. All I think of when I hear police academy is the movies.
I know, it was fun, man. Again, coming from my world and staying at the nicest hotels and room service and like really no rules,
Right.
going into kind of a military style, staying on one of the worst beds I've ever slept on, and fortunately it was only a couple weeks. So I will say that guys that go to a lot of academies go for like 16 week. They have much longer academies, and I only had to do a 2-week kind of fire hose of information for 2 weeks.
Yeah.
But it was fun. I had I think a 19-year-old roommate, and bed checks and cafeteria food, and got called into the principal's office a few times. And so I had to learn how to study all over again, and like take notes and actually use a computer and learn things. But great experience. But I'm glad that's over with.
Yeah, I bet. I can only imagine.
Yeah, I'm glad it was a one-time deal.
That's good. Let me ask you real quick about, because I keep going back to the human trafficking thing. You said you focus now more on the United States. Mm-hmm. It's a big problem here, isn't it, in the States? I think people think human trafficking and they think Thailand or they think another country or around the world, but it's big here too still, isn't it?
Yeah.
Unfortunately.
It is. And I don't want to play it up to that it's the biggest issue we have going on in the US. You know what I'm saying? There is so many large issues. I don't know that any are growing as fast as human trafficking. I think statistically it's the second fastest growing criminal enterprise behind the drug trade. I think it's past the weapons trade, and now, so it's not slowing down. What I'm learning is that one, it's in every county, and I can say that because I live in a really small county, and have had some issues here. Most of our work recently, in the past probably 8 months, I've spent a lot of time in Kansas City, trying to put a dent in that up there, and it's again never ending, constant supply and demand running through the city. But yeah, I've been blown away. The more I learn about it, the more I realize I don't know and need to learn. I love working with I get to work now with some of our HSI and FBI partners, guys that have been doing it a long time, and just kind of just being a sponge around those guys and soaking it up. But I'm amazed at how big the issue is and how hidden the issue is, because nobody sees it. So it's not one of those that you're like, you think about it, man, it can't be that big a deal because I just don't see it anywhere. And
yeah,
again, that would probably take a couple hours to really dive into the psychology of what happens with these girls and how they end up in these situations, and how, what I will say is we need to be really careful of how we view prostitutes. And my complete misunderstanding was that they're out there doing it on their own. A lot of them are, but a lot of them aren't. And you just don't see that until you start really diving in. But all of it comes, I say all of it because there isn't the like van pulls up and bag over their head kidnapping like you would think, and like happens in other countries. But ours is social media. Ours is absolutely the recruitment on social media by these guys, and a lot of them college-age dudes, good-looking guys that can speak the language, and they'll get the 15 or 16-year-old girl to think that they are like their knight in shining armor, and maybe even take them out to a nice restaurant, buy them a dress, buy them some purses, like get that relationship going. And then, shortly after that, they look up and they're in a spot that they can't get themselves out of. So yeah, just the dangers of social media, and what I wish every young, especially young female, was aware of, was the people you're talking to is not always what you think their agenda might be. Just to be cautious of that.
Yeah. I want to be fair too with people listening. Are like, all right, I'm hearing this, I want to help. I've told our audience for, a while now. IJM's been one of our partners and sponsors at Sports Spectrum, and we love IJM. Where would you direct people if they wanted to help or be a part? Certainly IJM's a great organization. Is there any other area maybe that we can direct people?
No, I think that's a great tip of the spear organization. First of all, IJM, anytime you talk to anybody in this fight, it doesn't take 5 minutes into the conversation and IJM is mentioned. I mean, they're doing what everybody else is striving to do.
Yeah.
I think the hardest part for people is wrapping their mind around the difference in, as far as after the recruitment and when the girls are already in that life, the difference between prostitution and trafficking, and how those are so tightly linked together, that you're not going to physically see a difference. So we just need to be cautious of how we view these girls. But and diving into some of the resources, Polaris Project would be a good one just to log into and just read on some of the stats. And I think they have a ton of links there that you can go down the rabbit trail of information to understand. But I will say that the majority of these girls that we find, that we constantly find, are the runaways, the foster kids, the girls that grew up really without parents. Maybe their parents were physically there, but not there at all. And really just the forgotten, the forgotten and the vulnerable.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing all of that. Adam LaRoche, this has been a really powerful conversation. As we wind down, I want to ask you, we haven't talked about the pandemic or 2020 or race relations or a divided country politically. There's so much that's happened this year. And I don't want to get into all of it, but I'm curious for you, maybe there's a scripture, some Bible reading, topic, something that the Lord's impressed on your heart and resonated with you most this year in 2020. Can you share a little bit about what maybe God has taught you and showed you?
I've struggled with it. My wife gave me a little wooden plaque that she put on my desk, and it just says, "Be still." So I don't even know what the Bible verse is. Be still and know that I am God. And she gave me that probably a year ago, and I'm staring at them, and sometimes it kind of pisses me off when I see it there on my desk, because I know she put it there for a reason. Like, hey, slow down. It's, there's a time and a place.
Yeah.
And the more I look at it, and especially with COVID and everything going on, and I remember looking at that and one day, and this was months ago, but thinking, man, I feel like I don't know that God caused any of this, but I think he can absolutely use it. And I've heard some, and I'm sure you have too, some unbelievable stories of very wealthy CEOs and business owners that have changed kind of their whole, all their SOPs of how they operate their business, seeing kind of the need for employees to be home and recharge, and the family time there, and getting reintroduced to their kids and seeing sports with their kids for the first time, or no sports at all, and just having their kids at home doing sports in the backyard the way we used to, and just all the cool stories, all the way down to guys here in our small town that as bad as it sucked and maybe lost their job and I know it was terrible for a lot of people. So I don't want to make it sound like this was all a big positive experience, but I think a lot of people experienced some really cool perspective changes. And mine was that little plaque that just to be still, and not feel like you have to be, constantly doing. Because I don't know that, and that's where I should say I struggle with the balance. So what is God? Is it be still and just chill out and wait for him to call you into something? Is it to run 100 miles an hour and like slide into heaven totally out of gas? You know what I mean? So yeah, I trust me, I have not figured it out. I do know there's a balance there of finding the time to have that kind of recharge. So Jason, I don't even know what your original question was, man. I got off on the COVID thing and that the be still. You mentioned one of the verses I've been thinking about recently, and it's been one of my favorites for a long time. And I think it's in First Corinthians somewhere, and it's stand firm in your faith, act like men, be strong. Let everything you do be done in love. So, and that just kind of sums up who I want to be, and the type of and the Jesus that I want to represent, and just be a light for him. And honestly, I love doing it in the darkness, and I think that's one of the attractions to the human trafficking fight is I find myself in some really dark situations, but in that is when I've seen God's light shine more than any other part of my life. I'm convinced that we all pray for faith, and we look at people and we look at our peers or our pastors, or we're like, man, I wish I had faith like that. Like, gosh, I want to have faith like that one day. And I'm convinced that you can pray for it all you want. I don't know, and God can do it. He can absolutely just snap, and you've got that type of faith. But I think he also wants us to earn it. And I think you get that by putting yourself in position where you have to rely on your faith, right? I think that's where it grows, is like you mentioned earlier, here in the US, it's difficult because we are really in a very secure bubble, it's fairly safe and honestly kind of in a way, kind of a fantasy, especially me, where I live out here on a ranch, secluded from everything. It's a fantasy world compared to the rest of the world.
Yeah. Well, still though, in 2020, that safe world has been ripped away from a lot of people, right? Like you said. So, the comforts and the way that we live. I mean, a lot of people lost their jobs. Obviously, a lot of people got sick. A lot of people had things happen to them. So I think you're right. It's almost forced us to, especially those of people of faith, it's forced us to connect with God in a deeper way, because like you said, it's leaning on and trusting in God when things aren't going well, that I think is really the test of our faith. Because when things are going great, it's easy to say, hey, God, you're awesome. Look at me. Everything's wonderful. But it's when you go through those valleys, right?
And I think even outside of just believers, Jason, I think, and I'd love to see, I don't know if there's stats on it or if you can find that, but I think when churches went online, I've just talked to a lot of people that would never be caught dead walking into a church building, that all of a sudden are doing, watching from their living room. And now those are a lot of the same people that I'm seeing, a lot of different faces in church that weren't there pre-COVID, that got introduced to Jesus through what we're doing right here, through online Zoom type.
Yeah.
And I've heard a lot of pastors talk about that too. Just some of the, some of those stories that have come out of it. I think, and I know you don't want to talk politics, and I don't either, but I think with one thing with this election, that as followers of Jesus, should we sweat over it? Really? I mean, do we really trust that God's got it? And I had a great conversation with Drake, my son, the other day, and I've had some with my wife and buddies and if we have fear over who's in that office, we might need to just do a little, self-check, kind of look in the mirror and where do we put our hope and our faith in? And I'm not totally there. I'm not saying that's me and I got that figured out, but that's one thing that I've enjoyed pondering the last week or so, is it shouldn't matter. I want to be strong enough to where I'm like, awesome, whoever's in, that's exactly who God needs in right now, and he's going to do something great with it. So
yeah,
I want to be confident in that.
Adam LaRoche, thank you, my friend. It's been a great conversation. Always good to catch up.
You too, buddy. You too.
Right.
Thanks for the invite, and let's do it again.
That was amazing stuff right there. It really was. From Adam LaRoche, the former Major League Baseball player, 12 years in the big leagues with the Braves, Pirates, Red Sox, Diamondbacks, Nationals, and White Sox, and now I mean, he's Deputy Adam LaRoche. You heard him talk about going back to the police academy and the work that he's doing to combat human trafficking. We actually spent another 20 minutes talking after we stopped recording, and he told me a few of the things that he's seeing and going through in this world of human trafficking, and it just breaks your heart. I mean, the fact that it's still going on and it's going on here, just, I don't know. It really made me shake my head, but it also made me think, wow, Adam LaRoche is really using his platform and not just looking to capitalize on his name post MLB career, but he's out there being the hands and feet of Jesus in an amazing way, saving these girls who are stuck in human trafficking. So such cool stuff there, amazing stories. And you won't find a better guy than Adam LaRoche. I've gotten the pleasure to have meeting him and talking to him a few times in person, and then of course over Zoom today. And just a great, great guy with a heart for Jesus and a heart to serve others. And just loved my time talking to him. He was awesome. So appreciate Adam being here on the show today. I hope it encouraged you just as much as it encouraged me. We thank Adam for joining us here today on Sports Spectrum. We also want to thank our partners and sponsors today on the show. We have Water Mission as they fight the global water crisis. You can learn more by going to watermission.org. And then our friends at Compassion International with the Fill the Stadium initiative, helping children in crisis right now across the world. Learn more by going to fillthestadium.com, fillthestadium.com. We also want to direct you to our website, sportspectrum.com, and then also check out our podcast wherever you listen to podcasts. Apple, of course, you're checking out our podcast because you're listening. Good job there, Jason. But if you're doing that right now, whatever app you're listening to this podcast on, click the subscribe button if you could. It just helps you never miss an episode of the show. And then lastly, telling someone about Sports Spectrum and this podcast would be amazing. It's really how this show grows. It's how our platform grows. And our desire is not just to grow, though. Our desire is to reach as many people we can with the gospel of Jesus Christ through sports. And that's what we do here at Sports Spectrum. So we appreciate you. We appreciate you listening and tuning in right now. We appreciate you telling someone else about Sports Spectrum. My name is Jason Romano. Thank you again for tuning in, and we'll see you next time right here on the show. Have a great rest of your day.